Okay. Good to see everyone. So our friend William will not be in class today. I mentioned I would say this later, but I'll say it here. His oxygen O2 is 58% and heart rate is 119. So it looks like he's passing away, and I think they want to Rebecca and William's son want to probably be with him without the hassle of, iPads or computers open and stuff like that. So, Carrie, would you like to put up the prayer? And then we're going to do a little motivation using the 5 forces at the time of death as our topic today. Okay, thank you for that. Where is this? Can't seem to find this here. Okay. Sangye churang soki chognam la Changchu padu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki drola penchir sangye drupa sho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings, all migrating beings. Migrating means migrating through the 6 classes, the hell realms, the pretas, the animals, the humans, the anti-gods, the asuras, and the suras, which also include the form and formless devas. Sangye churang soki chognam la Changchu padu dagni kapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki trola penche sangye drupasho. And then short mandala. By offering this ground anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy such a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release, please send down a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Rana Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Okay. So, good to see you all. We're going to begin with a little meditation on the 5 forces at the time of death. Sort of the timeliness of this is because our dear friend William is near passing away. Geshe Damdul has obviously passed away many, many months ago already and has been cremated, as some of you may know. But we ourselves have to kind of prepare for the inevitability of our own demise. Most of us are, not facing death immediately, but some of us are kind of old timers. So I'm going to just change my camera here, and we will begin. Let's see here. There we go. So sit comfortably with your back straight, eyes slightly closed, still some light coming in. In the case of some of you who are relaxing, like Shanka, don't fall asleep. And think the time of that death, my eventual death, is certain, definite. I will definitely die, as is stated by the Buddha and in the sutras, sort of in a poetic way, sort of religious way, Buddhist way. The Lord of Death comes to everyone, and there's no way to avoid him. So people of high status, low status, everyone dies. We ourselves, whatever we do, taking the best medicine, taking the best care of ourselves, we will eventually die. But in addition to that, the time of death is uncertain. Like when Geshe Damdul went out recently, a couple of months ago, for a walk in the evening, I'm sure he had no idea whatsoever that he would be dead in a short time. When our karma finishes to live, or when intervening karma, negative karma obstacles arise, we can be dead in a short time. And of course, there's nothing that helps at the time of death except the Dharma. So in regard to that, imagining that we're nearing our own death, and think that the Buddha told that there are 5 forces or 5 powers that were renowned during this life, and that could also be applied at the time of death. So let's go through them, contemplating them, how we would do. The first one is called, generally you could call it the force of intention. In Tibetan, we say pempeto. So pempa means kind of like to propel. So you could say intention, but it's not the usual word for intention. What it means is to make a very strong, statement in one's mind, motivation in one's mind, that, for instance, may I be able to develop bodhicitta and keep it firmly in the bardo realm between lives, as well as keeping bodhicitta in my future lives. They have a thought like that at the time of death. So can you imagine that in the bardo, even now, for us to develop the thought of bodhicitta, we have to use effort, we have to contemplate. What will it be like when we leave this body and enter the intermediate state, the bardo? Praying that will spontaneously, there will be the thought to develop, to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings, the thought of bodhicitta in the bardo and in future lives when we're a child, as we're growing up. That's not the only intention, force of intention. Thinking that in my future lives, may I practice all of the stages of the path. May I be assiduous in my study as well as in my meditation practice. If the situation arises, may I take ordination as a nun or monk. Things like that, to have that kind of thinking process going on while you're in the last weeks or months of your life, familiarizing with that, developing these 5 forces. The second force is called the force of the white seed, Karpo sabon gitop. Karpo means white, sabon means seed, top means force or power. So what this means, generally during life, what it means is to try to create a collection of virtuous deeds, white seeds, for the act as the cooperative causes of realizations. Here at the time of death, the force of the white seed is something like this: to strive to give away everything that you possess, so that you don't die with, as what was his name, Berzin mentions, with heavy luggage. In other words, so there's no sort of hesitancy at the time of death, that you'll be able to go without any kind of hesitancy. Lama Yeshe used to quote one Tibetan Lama with his clairvoyance, who knew the mind stream, could read the mind stream of one of his other disciples, a highly realized being who was at the point of death. But because of his attachment to the Tibetan tea on his table, he was having trouble to leave. So with his clairvoyance and psychic powers, this highly realized Lama sort of sent a message to the person saying, there's better tea in Tushita heaven. He was able to leave. So the force of the white seed, usually the Kadampa Geshes would distribute before the time of death all of their extra, possessions, and have a community agreement that at the time, that after they passed away, all of their remaining possessions would be distributed to the other monks. So in some of our cases, maybe to make a will to donate to the various centers or to the Dalai Lama or others, our wealth, so that we have that out of the way. So force of intention, force of the white seed, then the force of familiarity or habituation, gompeto. Gompa is, this spelling is the kind of the definition of meditation. The meditation, Maitreya said, is familiarizing the mind or habituating the mind with a wholesome state. So the force of habituation is to think, I want to work toward enlightenment in all future lives so as to be best able to help everyone. So to familiarize our mind with that in everyday life, when you're waiting for the toaster oven to toast to warm up your food, or when you're, washing the dishes, to think like that, familiarize your mind with that thought, to be able to work for the sake of enlightenment, to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, and to be able to best help everyone. That's called the force of habituation. And then the fourth one is called the force of, literally the force of repudiation, sunjin gito. You could say it, you could call it remorse, but sunjin usually means to repudiate something. Say, for instance, the self-cherishing thought. To feel strong, do we say that in English? Strong repudiation of that thought. This should not be part of my being. This should not be part of my future continuum. Especially the self-cherishing thought, but of course, self-grasping, grasping at a self of persons and so forth. And also it relates to feeling remorse about the negative actions that we've done this lifetime, and thinking that in my future lifetimes, having repudiated, these actions, having decided that I will not engage in those kind of actions, to try to do the contrary to that. So this relates to self-cherishing our own bodies. It's said that we should die like a bird taking off from a rock, just fly off without looking back. before we die, we should feel regret about our past negative actions and try to renew our bodhisattva vows. So if you have also tantric vows and you have an ability to do a self-initiation, as you notice when some practitioners and lamas are passing away, the monks perform in their presence or in the next room the self-entry, the self-initiation of their deity to renew their tantric vows. They take the bodhisattva vows again. They do the monastic sojung, the bi-monthly confession. There's a special kind, auspicious sojung, they call it, that can be done to renew or to purify and renew the monastic vows. So that's called the force of repudiation. And then finally, the force of prayer, Munlam Gitop, to pray not to be separated from bodhicitta and the opportunity to work toward enlightenment in all our future lifetimes, or to pray to be born in a pure realm, if not, to be born as a human and quickly meet qualified Mahayana teachers, Mahayana spiritual friends, Ewe Shenyan, to pray to be born in a family that is not too affluent, not too poor, to have all the resources that are needed for our studies, to be guided by holy gurus in all our lifetimes. Why do we do that? So that at the time of death, we have the optimum kind of conditions, whether we practice some kind of other transference of consciousness or not. We have the optimal conditions, creating karma, repudiating negative actions and so forth, to be able to ripen the virtuous seeds on our mind stream to take rebirth in the human realm again, and to follow the path, to continue on the path toward enlightenment for the sake of all depthlessly kind mother sentient beings. So with that in mind, think I'm going to participate in class today, commentary on Lama Tsongkhapa's illumination of the intention, for the sake of achieving enlightenment, for the sake of all sentient beings, by accumulating the two collections of merit and wisdom, which are elucidated in the text. We need to know how to collect merit, how to collect wisdom, especially the collection of wisdom is one of the main subjects here. I'm going to participate in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And then bring your attention back to the present. Good to see you. I'll just mention once again, because some people have joined. I received an email from Rebecca Hamilton, who is William's ex-wife and caretaker now in Mexico, just half an hour ago or so. She said, Bill is no longer responsive. His O2 saturation is 58%. His heart rate is 119, which that's what I get up to when I walk around the track at the fitness center. So his heart rate is going up to compensate for the low amount of oxygen, which is dangerously low, and the fact that he's no longer responsive. She said, I don't know why his body won't let him go. Maybe he has some Tibetan tea on his table in front of him. Nevertheless, we are all with him at this exact moment, give our love and appreciation to everyone in the class. So we've been following that, as Bill was one of our members for many months now. So, so Ron is posting a link in the chat now that everyone is here to a slideshow or of a YouTube video about Geshe Damdul's life that was apparently played during a medicine Buddha puja at Shravasti Abbey. It's very moving if you get a chance to see that. Okay, how are we doing? Anyone have any questions from previous classes? Or any other question they need to be scratched right now? What are we doing? Seeing anyone? No? Stehi? That's not question mode, okay. Minto, okay. From San Mateo. What do you say? You have to unmute, Minto.
Oh, sorry. I have some technical difficulty with my microphone.
Oh, okay.
I have a quick question for the Medicine Buddha Sarana. If can I ask that question?
If it's not too long, it's a quick question.
Yes. Yeah. So there is a section at the end for multiplying the merit. So I'm just like, how does it work? You know, how does the merit multiplication works?
Okay, so there are various ways when we create some virtuous karma or negative karma for that matter. There are ways that it can be increased in impact, right, in power. One of them is by rejoicing. So, for instance, when you create virtuous karma, rejoicing about it, just when you're about to dedicate it, think, wow, I actually created virtuous karma, maybe more karma in this one session than many people create in their entire lives, in ordinary lives, maybe which were consumed with creating a lot of negative karma. Rejoicing increases the power of that. There are other ways to increase the power of the karma that we've created. One of them is through the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha taught in various sutras and tantras that by reciting a certain mantra or prayer, that will increase the value, the power of the karma that one has created. So there are various instances of that. Lama Zopa Rinpoche would always have a couple of those multiplying mantras, tacked on at the end of whatever rituals they were doing. Some of the centers, like the Amitabha Buddhist Center in Singapore, they have all of their sadhanas have all of those multiplying mantras at the end. So that is probably the source of what you're reading into in the Medicine Buddha Sadhana about multiplying the mantra. Is it multiplying the virtues? Is it a mantra or is it a prose or a verse of praise or what?
I think it's a combination of both. There's the Tibetan verses there, like Chom Den De Zin Chek Pa Tra Chom Pa Yen Dak Pa Zo Pai San.
Right. We get it. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
I can show, but basically, I want to understand like what does these verses mean, and then there's also the mantra that we're supposed to.
Okay. So you email me with that verse, and I will try to share with you as much as I know about the translation of that. So we say, Tomba Chom Den De Dejin Jaba Da Chomba Yang Da Zobe. Those are epithets of the Buddha.
I see.
Okay, so we'll continue that later. Anyone else have a question? How are we doing? John? Jennifer? Huh? Mary Ellen? Mary Ellen has a question. Okay, good.
I have a question, goes back a couple of sessions, but about the aggregates. And when we talk, I mean, there's nothing that's not a part of the aggregates, but when we talk about phenomena other than the phenomena that make up our own body mind, we don't use the word aggregates. It seems like everybody shies away from that. Why? I mean, can't we apply aggregates to all composite phenomena?
Yes, we can, to all impermanent phenomena, but not all phenomena are included in the five aggregates. All impermanent phenomena, say my trees outside, are included in the form aggregate. And the mind of the animals, the little deer that are running around my yard, they are included in various parts of the part of the five aggregates. But other phenomena that are permanent, like shunyata or selflessness, cessation, the two cessations, non-compounded space, and many other kinds of permanent phenomena. We'll talk about the multitudes of things that are permanent later on in the text. Those are not included in the five aggregates. So when the Buddha taught how to encompass phenomena, he taught three categories. He taught the aggregates, the entrances. In Tibetan, we say keche, or in Sanskrit, ayutana, and the, what will we call the kam, what do we say? The aggregates, the entrances, and the, how do they usually translate kam, John, Paul?
Is dhatu or
Dhatu, dhatu, the dhatus, if you want to use the Sanskrit word, the elements or something like that.
Yeah, the elements, and then usually, what is it for the geche? Sense spheres, something like that.
Sense spheres or entrances, right? So those last two include all phenomena, both impermanent and permanent. So not everything that exists, because permanent phenomena do exist. Not everything is included in the five aggregates. Does that help, Mariana? Okay, good.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, so we're going to start, and I'll give a little review before this. We're going to start at the section called Grasping at True Existence, the Contrary Apprehension, which is in Anne Klein's book on page 179. We're starting a new outline. What page is this in, Jimpa?
185.
185. Okay, good. I better put that in so for future reference. So what does that mean? Nadine likes to be quizzed, I know. So when it says in Jimpa's translation, when it says grasping at true existence, the contrary apprehension, or as Anne translates it, the concept of true existence that conceives the opposite of that, or opposite of this. What is this? What is this the contrary of, Nadine?
The selflessness of persons and phenomena.
Okay, if you go back, the first outline was a little more specific. That's pretty good. Pretty good stab. But the outline was how phenomena are posited through the force of conceptuality. And there we had various sutra quotes that explained how, in various ways, phenomena arose through the force of conceptuality, that they were imputed by conception, and that they are even karmically created by, our conceptual minds, our inattentive perception, our not inattentive, our inappropriate attention, creating the causes for afflictions and so forth. So phenomena are posited through the force of conceptuality. That was the first part. And now the conception of true existence that conceives the opposite of this, that conceives that phenomena are not imputed by conceptuality. Okay, this to be more precise. Okay, so just to give a little review. So last time, Lama Tsongkhapa, the commentary, just the verses, the paragraphs before that say, if one understands these well, what is these? The quotations from the precious garland and so forth. For instance, because material things are mere names, space too is a mere name. How can there be matter with no elements? Therefore, mere names too do not exist. Feelings, discriminations, mental formations, and consciousness contemplate these just like the elements or the self. Therefore, the six elements have no selfhood. And apart from being designated by conventions, how could there be a world in reality as either existed or non-existent? So those are the verses that were being quoted, saying that all of these phenomena are just conceptually imputed. If one understands these well, Lama Tsongkhapa said, one will soundly or comprehend well how phenomena are necessarily posited through dependence. Remember, we went through this list last time. Where is this? Anne has a different enumeration of them here. Jimpa says how phenomena are necessarily posited through dependence. They're posited depending on the basis of imputation and so forth, on the parts. To how the very virtue of their being dependently designated and their having arisen through dependence, they have no existence in their own right. Because they're dependent arisings, they cannot have any kind of inherent existence. 3, how they do not possess an independent nature, something that is not posited through the power of some other conventions. And 4, no matter the phenomenon, when it is posited as existent, it is done so without analysis, without seeking a true referent behind the designation. So we talked a little bit about that. When you posit something as existing, when I say that Ida is existing, if I search for her conventionally with conventional analysis, I can find her in a certain state, in a certain block in the city, in a certain house, in a certain room, and I can point her out in the room. But if I try to look beyond that and say, where is the real Ida, within her aggregates, that is that is entering into what's called ultimate analysis. So here it says, no matter what phenomena, when it is posited as existent, it is done so without analysis. That means without ultimate analysis, without seeking a true referent behind the designation. Okay, so we're all on the same page here. Does that make sense to everyone? Miguel, you're okay? Yeah, okay. Don? Okay, so this is our new section now. Grasping a true existence, the contrary apprehension, contrary to phenomena being posited by conceptuality. So Jimpa's text translation says, grasping at things as existent as described above, not posited by the power of conventions such as name alone, constitutes innate grasping at things as true, as ultimate, as absolute existence. I don't like his choice of absolute. That's usually something that we try to avoid because of the connotations and in other languages of the word absolute. When he's talking about true, this is demparjupa, true existence or true establishment. These are hypothetical synonyms of true existence. Ultimate existence, dondamparjupa. Real existence, Jimpa translates, or yangdakparjupa. I think Anne translates this as, she says, establishment as one's own reality. No, sorry. In Anne's text, she divides these are 6 hypothetical synonyms, right? The conception of existence not posited merely through the force of nominal conventions. You know, some kind of positing of phenomena, not simply giving a name to it, a mere name, explained above, is the innate conception of true establishment, ultimate establishment, establishment of as the object's own reality, as well as the innate conception of existing by way of the object's own entity, existing by way of the object's own character or characteristics, and existing inherently. Jimpa takes them in his note to this verse in his translation. He says, true existence, ultimate existence, real existence, existence by virtue of an essential nature, existence through intrinsic characteristics, and intrinsic existence. Usually we've been calling that inherent existence, Rangshin Gidrupa. So these 6 constitute the innate grasping at things from the Prasangika point of view. From the Svatantrika Madhyamaka point of view, grasping to the last 3 don't constitute innate grasping at true existence. They do talk, Svatantrika Madhyamaka talks about grasping at true existence as an impediment to enlightenment, right? Impediment to even achieving the first bhumi. But they say that phenomena are inherently existent. These last 3, 4, 5, and 6, as Jimpa translates, existence by virtue of an essential nature, which is ngo niki drupa, existing by way of its own entity. They say that phenomena do exist that way, that they are inherently existent somewhere in the own entity of the phenomena conventionally. Number 5, the Svatantrika say that phenomena exist through intrinsic characteristics, Rangitseni Gidrupa, that there's some some general and specific characteristics that exist inherently on the conventional level. So they don't refute that. They don't say that grasping to that is an example of the innate grasping to true existence. And then the final one, intrinsic existence, or as I like to translate, inherent existence, Rangshin Gidrupa. Rangshin usually is Svabhava. How is that in Rangshin Gidrupa in Sanskrit, the whole phrase, Paul or John, do you know? Svabhava
Siddha.
Siddha.
Yeah.
Svabhava Siddha.
Rangshin Drupa, yeah. Svabhava Siddha. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah, Swabhava Siddha or maybe Swabhava Siddhi, depending.
So the word, you've heard the word.
Establishment is this, yeah, that's
Yeah.
Siddhi.
So those of you, you've heard the word siddhi before, right? You know, like, you know, the yogi has various siddhis, psychic powers, or the mahasiddhas, those beings that have siddhas are beings that have siddhis. So there's some connection with those words, but here it's mainly the siddha means established, more or less. Okay, so continuing, Lama Tsongkhapa's text is translated by Jimpa says, it is the case here as well that one needs to be cognizant of there being two senses of the term ultimate when qualifying the object of negation with the proviso ultimately. Or as Anne says, the need to know the two modes of ultimate in the qualification of object of negation with the term ultimately is also the same here in the Prasangika school as it was in the Svatantrika school explained in the previous chapter. Do you remember that? You guys remember the difference between ultimately, the two ways that the word ultimately are used? Okay, Nadine's going to explain first, then Stephen will pick up any crumbs that she forgot.
Emptiness is established by ultimate reasoning, but it cannot withstand ultimate reasoning.
It cannot be, it is not ultimately existing. No phenomena is ultimately existing, but say it another way. If I start by saying no phenomena is ultimately existing, but
the ultimate nature exists.
But ultimate nature exists. Emptiness or shunyata is the ultimate nature. Okay, so that was also explained in the Svatantrika school, and that's the same here in the Prasangika. Although the proponents of Svatantrika Madhyamaka maintain existence in terms of the first three, true existence and so on, to be impossible. I was wondering what they maintain existence to be impossible. Okay, so they say it's impossible that the first three, true existence, what were the other ones? Ultimate existence, and as Jimpa says, absolute existence or real existence. They say those are impossible. Okay, although proponents of Svatantrika maintain the existence in terms of the first three, true existence and so on, to be impossible, they nonetheless accept on the conventional level, remember, there's a inherent existence for them exists in the conventional level, but on the ultimate level, even inherent existence doesn't exist ultimately, right? Nevertheless, they accept on the conventional level the remaining other three existing by way of an essential nature and so on. Personally, oh, sorry, go on. I thought someone had a question. Okay. Personally, so this is Chimpa's way of saying what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying. Personally, I see this Svatantrika standpoint to be an example of great skillful means to help guide those who are, for the time being, not capable of easily realizing the extremely subtle view of suchness. Whereas, as Anne translates, this is seen as a very skillful means for leading those who are temporarily unable to realize easily the very subtle suchness to that realization of suchness. So this is something that we've encountered many times. Amasung Khapa here is praising the existence of the Svatantrika viewpoint, because it's kind of like a step to be able to ascend to the more precise view of the view of emptiness. Okay, making sense? It's all pretty simple. We've talked about before, right? When I say pretty simple, it's still profound. But okay. So continuing. Thus, the purported reality of phenomena, not dependent on some other factor, namely the convention-making, conceptualizing subject, an intrinsic nature supposedly not posited through such conceptualization, unquote, so this is a quotation, is what is called self-existence, and this is the object of negation. That's a mouthful, right? Anne Klein translates it differently. She says, in this way, just that inherent existence, when we talk about inherent existence, Rangshingi Drupa, which is an entity of phenomena, right? We're talking about inherent existence. Remember, Svatantrika accepts inherent existence and two others conventionally, which is an entity of phenomena not depending on or not posited through the force of another. And Jimpa's translation is good because he adds the word, when we say other, namely other means not dependent on convention making, conceptualizing subject. So Anne Klein translated, in this way, just that inherent existence that the Svatantrikas accept, which is an entity of phenomena, some kind of being of phenomena that does not depend on anything else, does not depend on another. And another in this case is talking about does not depend upon the conceptualizing mind, or it is not posited through the force of another. That is the subjective terminological conceptual consciousness, or she says that is the other that is being that the phenomena don't have to depend on, is the subjective terminological conceptual consciousness, is called the self that is the object of negation. That sounds really complicated, right? What is that? Is that something we didn't talk about before? Wow. So Anne said, where did we say that? In this way, just that inherent existence, which is an entity of phenomena not depending on or not posited through the force of another, that is to say, not dependent on a subjective terminological conceptual consciousness, or as Chimpa says, a convention-making conceptualizing subject, is called the self that is the object of negation. Who, upon hearing that, has grokked that? Stephen, you kind of understand?
Yeah, Venerable George, I think I kind of understand. When we talk about the subjective terminological conceptual consciousness, well, we say that things are merely imputed by name and concept.
Right. It's talking about that.
I think that's what it's talking.
Right. It's talking about that particular kind of mind, right? Make sense? Mikhail? Makes sense. Ida? KT, you reading? You okay?
Yeah, just unpacking that. Is it saying like subject and subject and object, and then the object is empty from its own side because there's no subject involved, or am I just totally off on the wrong track there?
I'm not sure that's exactly appropriate, exactly what's meant here. Here it's talking about, what is the self that's being refuted here? It's a self that doesn't depend on anything else. In particular, it doesn't depend on the mind that is imputing it, because all, from the Prasangika point of view, all phenomena, conventional, ultimate, whatever, are imputed conventionally with names and by names or thoughts. We say Ming Tok. Sometimes in the sutras it says Bodhisattva is just a name. Sometimes it talks about conceptions or thoughts also. So phenomena are created by your mind, thinking about them, like the cow thinking about the salt block, or giving a name to them, having thought about them, mama, and so forth and so on. That's what's being talked about here. Thus, the purported reality of phenomena. So Jimpa has added the word purported here. That's not in the Tibetan. There's not a word that means that here. I think it's kind of his commentary saying that so the Tibetan says Chunam gi ngo. So that means the entity of phenomena, plural. And he's saying the purported entity of phenomena, or the purported reality of phenomena. He's just adding that to say that in the end, we will see that such an entity that doesn't depend on a conceptualizing consciousness doesn't exist. So that's kind of his commentary there. Okay, does that make sense? In Anne's translation, she doesn't have the word purported. She says, just in this way, just that inherent existence, Jimpa would say, that purported inherent existence, that hypothetical inherent existence, which is an entity of phenomena not depending on or not posited through the force of another. So the other, when we say another, the force of another, what is the another? The not posited through the force of a subjective, that means a mental mind, terminological conceptual consciousness, a conceptual consciousness that is giving names. Remember when we talked about the word terminology, and I think it will come up again. Terminology has 2 or 3 types. There's outer terminology when you give a name, dog, tree. There's inner terminology, which is the conception that's thinking of something, either having a name for it or simply like a baby or a cow that doesn't have names, just having a concept. And then there's a third kind of terminology when you, just by signs, you point or you use sign language, like in the news conferences and so forth. So that's what's meant by terminological conceptual consciousness. Does that help? Is it making a little sense?
Yes, that's the one who names, is the terminological conceptualizing consciousness. Could we say that is the one who names, or the mind who names? Can we
say again, KT? I miss. I was trying to find who was speaking, and usually there was a little box around when people spoke.
sorry, went out there. Thanks, Venerable George. Can we say that terminological conceptualizing consciousness is the mind, or the one who is the naming being, or the namer, before. The
Right, right,
subject is the name, the label maker.
right. Yeah, the label maker, right.
Okay.
Like that machine
Thank you
that
so much.
rings.
Helpful. Thank you.
So Sasha, I think you had your hand up and I missed, you took down. Did you have a question?
Yes, I was asking if this is similar to how in particle physics they often talk about the observer changing like the reality, and if this is referring to the reality that exists without there being an observer that can change it.
Right. So yeah, so modern physics talking about this, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle is related to this. Do you all know the Heisenberg uncertainty principle? John McMahon, do you know the Heisenberg uncertainty principle?
No.
No, Sasha does. Sasha, what's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle?
Oh, I'm not qualified. I just found it really fascinating that the thing that stuck in my mind was that the observer will literally change the reality. The experiment where they shine light, I think, through
Right.
beams, and if you are doing anything to observe it, they will behave like I forget.
Right. They observed as photons, otherwise, yeah. So this is all related to maybe this is a discussion for discussion group on Monday, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Werner Heisenberg. I think he was he in the movie Oppenheimer? Who saw Oppenheimer? Anyone?
I don't think so.
No? Werner Heisenberg was the big German physicists. Anyway, so okay, so we get a little bit of understanding here. So is what is called a self-existence, and this is the object of negation. So something that is not imputed by mind at all, not imputed by thought or conception, is self-existence. Or just self, as Anne says, is called the self that is the object of negation. So here for Prasangika, the object of negation includes more things than the Svatantrika includes. Svatantrika has a smaller list. So then Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary continues. And the absence of this, meaning that this self, that it doesn't depend on conceptualizing mind, the absence of this in relation to a person has been stated to be the selflessness of persons. Right? So if you talk about the person, you can kind of identify your own self, when you search for the self. And the absence of, what appears to the mind naturally from beginningless time is a self that doesn't depend upon any conceptualizing labeling, doesn't depend on being labeled by mind. It seems to be there inherently from its own side, able to set itself up. So the, what does he say here? The absence of this kind of self in relation to a person has been stated to be the selflessness of persons. So when you realize the object of negation that you've been grasping to doesn't exist, you have realized the selflessness of persons. While its absence upon phenomena, such as eyes and so on, has been stated to be the selflessness of phenomena. So there, the word self has to be taken in a new way. Usually in English, when we use the word self, we think of people, right? Or animals, or say, himself. He did it himself or herself, or they have a self. But also phenomena have a kind of self, not in any kind of animated way, not that they walk around and they do things, but they have a self-existence. That's what's being implied here. The absence of this kind of self-existence that doesn't depend upon conceptualizing mind is when it's applied to other phenomena other than persons is called the selflessness. The absence of that is called the selflessness of phenomena. Right? Karen, what do you think?
Thank you, Venerable George. I just wanted to see if you wanted to take a break.
Oh, okay, good idea. Let's take a 3, 4, 5 minute break. Good idea. Thank you. Oh, you can continue to discuss if you want. Turn my video. Also, the outer terminology can include things like actually pointing with your finger and pointing with your finger, or signing like in sign language. Even ancient, cultures, they might have uttered things in the prehistoric ages. They might have had some sounds that meant something, some kind of rudimentary language, but they'd often used kind of sign language, maybe even in kind of with their own dialects and so forth. Okay, we're back. Give a chance to get back from your, if you went to get tea, I'll let it cool off a little bit there for you. Oh, Sean got some tea. Okay, good. Excellent. Okay, so what do you think? When we've talked a long time about the self of phenomena. Does that terminology bother anyone still? If you talk about a self of phenomena, it means some kind of existence there that your mind believes exists within that thing, as though it had some kind of self-existence. That's what's meant. Okay, so a person has been stated to be the selflessness of persons, and while its absence in phenomena such as eyes and so on has been stated to be the selflessness of phenomena. From this, we can implicitly understand, and I can do it with my cursor from my computer here. Shukitok. One can realize shuki, which means kind of like by the way or implicitly, that grasping at such an intrinsic nature on the basis of the person and so on, such as intrinsic, one can implicitly understand that grasping at such an intrinsic nature on the basics of the person and on the basis of phenomena are two forms of self-grasping. Why is that implicitly understood? Why not? What's the opposite of implicitly understand? Jennifer, do you know?
Would that be a direct realization?
Yeah, directly. So you can know things directly. That doesn't necessarily mean realize, but yeah, you can know things directly or indirectly or implicitly, sort of like, that, what's the famous thing? Fat Devadatta. Devadatta is the name of a monk, right? Fat Devadatta doesn't eat when?
By day.
By day.
Yeah, during the day.
Fat Devadatta doesn't eat by day. Jennifer, what can you implicitly understand from that? You can directly understand that fat Devadatta doesn't eat during the day.
Either he has a thyroid problem or he eats during the night.
Either he has a thyroid. Very generous of you, right? Right. Or he has some other kind of drug problem or something. Yeah. So things are implicit. Why is this? What does it mean that, and Anne says the same thing, thereby it is implicitly understood that the conceptions of that inherent existence as existing in persons and in phenomena are the conceptions of the two selves of persons and other phenomena. Anyone I have an idea why that's implicitly understood?
Well, Venerable, would that mean without any reservation, without any doubt?
No, implicitly means just, not directly. Okay, so something to think of. We'll talk about discussion groups. Think about that. That's a question I'll ask Nadine at the beginning of the next discussion group. She likes to have me ask questions, right? Okay, so anyway, minor point. So from this, we can implicitly understand that grasping at such an intrinsic nature on the basis of the person and on the basis of phenomena are the two forms of self-grasping. So there are two kinds of self-grasping. Again, the word self doesn't refer only to persons. It's talking about some kind of existence from its own side. There's the self-grasping of persons and the self-grasping of phenomena. Why did the Buddha bother to do that? Why did he make those two categories? What do you think, Paul?
Because the selflessness of persons is the object negation of the lower systems, right? Whereas the selflessness of phenomena is a well, let me think about that.
Yeah, as a Mahayana.
As a Mahayana assertion, right?
The Chittamatras and the Madhyamakas, both Svatantrika and Prasangika, talk about selflessness of phenomena. The selflessness of phenomena is not really accepted by the lower schools, other than that, in the sense that my mug is not an object of use of a self-supporting, substantially existent person. And that way, you could kind of force some kind of selflessness of phenomena. But generally, they say phenomena have a self. Phenomena other than the person, which is imputedly existent. So that's kind of, I think Paul's right, that's kind of the basis when we talk why there are these two categories of selflessness of persons, which is generally accepted by the Hinayana schools, and the selflessness of phenomena, which is an extension of that. This is as declared in the commentary on the 400 stanzas. So when he's talking about the commentary, generally that means Chandrakirti's commentary to Aryadeva, right? Aryadeva was the disciple of Nagarjuna, wrote the 400 stanzas, and Chandrakirti wrote an extensive commentary of that, one of his great commentaries. So Jimpa translates that in this way. Here, and this is a very famous quotation, here, what is referred to as self is that intrinsic nature, namely, the nature of things conceived as not dependent on others. So you can take that, as we said before, not dependent upon others, meaning conceptualizing terminological consciousness, name-giving consciousness, or as Katie said, the label-making consciousness. I think of these label-making machines, like so gray machines, you make labels for your store. Or you can think of it as, namely, the nature of things conceived as not dependent on others, meaning not depending on anything else, not dependent on parts, not dependent on causes and conditions and so forth. And the absence of this is selflessness. because of the twofold distinction of persons and phenomena, this selflessness is understood in terms of two kinds, the selflessness of phenomena and the selflessness of persons. Or as Anne translates more or less the same, here self is an inherent existence, an entity of things that does not depend on another. Its non-existence is selflessness. So the fact that there is no such thing that doesn't depend on anything else, that's kind of one of the criteria of hypothetical inherent existence, true existence, something that doesn't depend on anything else. That doesn't exist. So its non-existence is selflessness. This selflessness is understood as twofold through a division of persons and other phenomena, a selflessness of persons and a selflessness of phenomena. What Jimpa has here, selflessness of phenomena and selflessness of persons. I'm not sure. Might change the order. Let me see. What does the Tibetan say here? There it says, Chuki dakme dang, kangzaki dakme. So it says phenomena first, and then the selflessness of persons. So Jimpa had right and had the wrong order. So then the commentary continues. Here too, Lama Tsongkhapa says, in the following, Chandrakirti explains that the two forms of selflessness are distinguished not from the viewpoint of what is to be negated, but from the viewpoint of their basis. What does that mean? Who would like to make a stab? Don, have you remember this from previous studies? It says, Chandrakirti explains that the two forms of selflessness of persons and phenomena, there's a difference between them, right? In the lower schools, you say that the selflessness of persons negates a self-supporting, substantially existent person. And in the Chittamatra and Svatantrika, the various levels of Svatantrika, you talk about the selflessness of phenomena is negating something else, right? What did they negate? What does Chittamatra negate as a selflessness of phenomena?
The true existence of phenomena.
I'm asking you, Don. Don's going to give an answer.
Well, I'm not necessarily. I'm a little confused by the question now. The Chittamatras, I believe, negate the inherent existence other than being from the same seed as the karma.
Right, yeah, you've got the right idea. So Chittamatra says they accept the selflessness of persons, but the same as the lower schools, more or less, that you refute the absence of a self-supporting, substantially existent person with regard to persons. So that's what you refute on the persons. On other phenomena, you refute the fact that the phenomena exist separate from the consciousness that perceives it, right? They both, as you were reciting, they both arise from the ripening of one seed on the alaya vijnana, the foundation consciousness. And so there's not a causal relationship that you see something, there's something out there that you see that causes the consciousness. They both are together, that the phenomena that you think is external is actually the nature of your mind. That's what they call selflessness of phenomena. Svatantrika talks about other kinds of meaning, other things that's negated, other things that are negated on phenomena other than the person. So there's a different thing that's negated. So here he says here too, in the following, Chandrakirti explains that the two forms of selflessness are distinguished not from the viewpoint of what is to be negated. We just said there are two different things that are being negated on persons and phenomena. That's the lower schools, including the Svatantrika, everything lower than Prasangika. For Prasangika, Chandrakirti explains that for Prasangika, the two forms of selflessness are not distinguished from the point of view of what is to be negated. I changed the order of the words there, but from the viewpoint of their basis. So there is a quotation here from verse 179 in our text, let's say 179 of Majjhimaka Avatara, the root verses. The Buddha taught no self is twofold, or selflessness is twofold, in twofold terms, that of phenomena and that of persons. Where is that? Okay, yeah. Just as in the entrance, verse 179b and c, Jimpa says it's verse B. I think that's correct. It's the second line there. Also, just as in the entrance, that's her way of translating Majjhimaka Avatara. We say Avatara or Umala Jukpa. You could say entry into the middle way. Through a division of persons and other phenomena, it is said to be of two aspects. Okay, that's the famous verse. We'll come to that. We're just on like verse 6, 8 or 10 or something like that. When we get up to verse 179, that verse will come again. Someone have a question? So Jimpa's text continues, with regard to the innate identity view that's translating into our my favorite and sort of standard Hopkins-esque way of translating, with regard to the view of the transitory collection that grasps at self-existence. Okay. So selflessness of persons itself is of two kinds. Selflessness of yourself and selflessness of other persons. When you talk about the selflessness of yourself, that is understood as a realization that overcomes the view of the transitory collection. The view of the transitory collection is a view that grasps at a self of yourself, your own self, right? With regard to the innate, so again, this is not the intellectually formed, but the innate identity view, or the view of the transitory collection, grasping at self-existence, since the root text of the Majjhimaka Avatara rejects the aggregates as its object of focus. And I can't remember who said this at the beginning. Someone was asking about this. Who was that? Was that Mary Ellen? Yeah. So here we're coming. Since the root text of the Majjhimaka Avatara, here he's translating it, entering into the middle way, rejects the aggregates as its object of focus. And furthermore, in the commentary, so what does that mean? The Majjhimaka Avatara has two parts. The root text, which can separately be a separate book, just the karikas, just reading one verse after another, or the auto commentary, which has the root text and Chandrakirti's own explanation about each verse, right? So first, the root text rejects the aggregates as the object of focus of the view of the transitory collection. This innate grasping at a self of yourself. And furthermore, the commentary to that by Chandrakirti himself says that the self is dependently designated, is said to be its object of focus. Somehow I missed the grammar here. And in the commentary, the self that is dependently designated, right? The self that it does exist, that's just imputed by thoughts and concepts and words, the self that is dependently designated is said to be its object of focus. We should take the mere I or the mere person that is the focal object giving rise to the thought I am or I to be the object of the identity view. Whoa. Mouthful, right? What do you think? Anna, are you following?
I'm following, but I agree that's a mouthful, and I'm waiting to hear what you have to say.
Okay, let's read Anne first, okay? Anne says, with respect to the innate view of the transitory collection, which is terminology that we're more familiar with from reading Jeffrey Hopkins' translations. So Jigsaw we like to translate that way. With review to the innate view of the transitory collection, which is a conception of an inherently existent self. That's what the innate view of the transitory collection is, right? That's that basic samsaric ignorance that keeps us, according to Chandrakirti, that's the root ignorance of samsara. Nagarjuna in his text say that, no, it's avidya, ignorance in general. That's the root of samsara, but that's the debate we'll have later. So with respect to the innate view of the transitory collection, which is a conception of an inherently existent self, the root text, in the root text, it is refuted that the object of observation is the mental and physical aggregates. Okay, let's take that part first. So Jimpa says, rejects the aggregates as its object of focus. So in Tibetan, it says sawar, that means in the root text, pungpo mikpa yimpa kak. Kak means is refuted as the aggregates, pungpo, are refuted as being the referent, the mikpa. So what does referent mean? Jimpa says the object of focus, and says the object of observation. Neither of them get the actual word here. There's a difference when you have the word object there. The referent here means this. When you are conceiving of a self, when your mind is, you've been aggrieved in some way, someone has accused you or whatever, the I is rising very strongly in your mental continuum. If you investigate that, you'll see that you're not actually referring to or observing the aggregates. The mikpa means, mikpa, it just means the referent. The referent is not your aggregates. It's just the conventionally existent I, the mere I. That doesn't mean that you're conceiving of that I, that you're realizing that mere I or that conventionally existent I, but that's what you're thinking about, and you're conceiving it to be inherently existent, to be truly existent. All these other hypothetical synonyms, your mind is believing that way. It can set itself up from itself, by itself, it existing from its own side and so forth. So the root text of Majjhima Vigatara rejects the aggregates as its object of focus. So that means that jikta, that's our short way of saying jigsaw the view of the transitory collection, that it's what it's sort of referring to when it's grasping to a self is not the aggregates, it's referring to just the self itself, the conventionally existent self that it doesn't know yet, and it believes it to be inherently existent. Okay. And furthermore, in the commentary, Chandrakirti's commentary, auto commentary, the self that is dependently designated is said to be its object of focus, or in other words, its mikvah. So the root text says the objects are not the mikvah, not what's being referred to. And in the self-commentary, it says, indeed, what is being referred to is the self that is imputed, dependently designated, is said to be its mikvah, or object of focus, as Jimpa says. And says, and in the commentary, Chandrakirti says that the self-imputed independence upon the aggregates, she has in brackets, upon the aggregates, the self that is imputed independence, the dependently imputed self, is the object of observation. Again, neither of these say object of observation. They just say the mikvah. So in her note there, in Anne's translation, she has note 11 and note 12, right? She says, and in the commentary. So let's see here. I thought, yeah. So on page 271 in Anne's book, note 12, it's sort of, if you go to the end of the book, she has her end notes rather than footnotes, right? There, her commentary there says, the object of observation of a consciousness viewing the transitory collection as an inherently existent self, that's in brackets, is the nominally existent self. For that which conceives an inherently existent I has as its object an inherently existent self. For that which conceives of an inherently existent I has as its object an inherently existent self. So this is quoting commentary to verse 120 in our text. So again, we haven't gotten that far. That's, many weeks from now, a couple of months from now, we'll get to verse 120. So in Jimpa's text, if you have the written text on page 417, he has the verse that is being talked about here. This is the verse, the root verse, and then the commentary after it, starting on page 417 in Jimpa. So I'll read a little of that. So Jimpa says, he translates verse 6:120 that Anne said is what is being referred to here. Seeing with their wisdom that all afflictions and all faults stem from the identity view, or the view of the transitory collection, and knowing that the self is the focus or the referent of this identity view, the yogi engages in the negation of selfhood. Okay? We're following? This is coming in the future. That's what's being referred to at this point when it said, let's say, reading Anne's, it says, with respect to the innate view of the transitory collection, which is a conception of the self, in the root text, it is refuted that the object of observation is the mental and physical aggregates. So that's referring to this verse, because here it says, and knowing the self is the focus or the referent. Here it doesn't say that the aggregates are the referent. That's in the root verse. And then she says, and in the commentary, which I'll read in a second, right after that verse, which you can see on page 417 and subsequent pages, Chandrakirti says that the self-imputed independence is the object of observation. So what does he say there? So after this verse, it says, seeing that with their wisdom that all afflictions and faults stem from the view of the transitory collection. You know, when the yogi realizes this, all of my problems, all of the afflictions, all of my delusions and everything arise because of grasping to the self of persons. All of the other kinds of faults arise from it. And knowing that the self is the mikpa, is the referent or focus of this view of the transitory collection, the yogi engages in negation of this self. Okay, so the commentary says a yogi or yogini, yogi can be kind of generic, seeking to enter suchness and eliminate all faults of afflictions will contemplate, quote, what lies at the root, thinking, what lies at the root of this wandering and cyclic existence? That's what they think to themselves. What's the root of it? So Chandrakirti's view, remember when we talked that the root of samsara is the view of the transitory collection. This is a kind of confirmation of that, citation of that. In Fundamental Wisdom, Nagarjuna says, more encompassing, marikpa, avidya, which grasps at the non-inherent existence of all phenomena, is the root of cyclic existence. But we'll have, as I said, we'll have that debate later. What is the root of wandering and cyclic existence? When the yogi examines in this manner and seeing with their wisdom that all afflictions such as attachment and other faults such as birth, aging, sickness, and death, and so on, all stem from the view of the transitory collection, which is an afflicted intelligence that apprehends in terms of an intrinsically existent I and mind. So this is also another source of this statement. The view of the transitory collection is an afflicted wisdom. Usually we think wisdom is good, right? But some wisdoms that are contaminated by delusions, like the view of the transitory collection, are actually problematic. We say that the view of the transitory collection is a kind of wisdom, but it's not analyzing in the right way, right? Wisdom is something that looks at phenomena and is able to evaluate their characteristics. So it is a wisdom, a kind of wisdom, but an afflicted wisdom, stem from the view of the transitory collection, an afflicted intelligence or wisdom that apprehends in terms of intrinsically existent I and mine. All of these afflictions, without exception, all of these afflictions and all of these faults, such as birth, death, aging, and sickness, so forth, without exception, are in fact effects of the identity view, the view of the transitory collection. When one sees this, the wish to eliminate the view of the transitory collection will emerge. You're energized, When you've realized that the mouse in your cabinet has been eating your sugar, strong, wish to eliminate the mouse will emerge, right? Similar to that, right? A person with sharp intelligence will at this point come to recognize that elimination of the view of the transitory collection requires seeing how the self, as conceived by this view, has no objective existence, has no inherent existence. Just as stated in the passage quoted above, from the praise to the ultimate expanse and the 400 stanzas. So at this point in the text, just before that, there were quotations from what was it? Chewing Topa, what do we call it? The praise of the Dharma Dhatu, the praise of the Dharma Dhatu, which we've had some quotations from before by Nagarjuna, and in the 400 stanzas. So then it continues, and here's the verse, here's the words that are relevant here. And when that yogi examines what is the focus, what is the referent of clinging to this identity view, they will know that the self or I is the thought I am. So they will know that self or I in the thought I am or I is the focus, is the referent of this identity view. This is because the self is the object of I grasping. So this is what is mentioned here says, in the commentary, the self that is dependently designated is said to be its object of focus. So what is the referent of the view of the transitory collection? What is it referring to? The conventionally existent I, which is self, could be called the mere I, which can be called the I that is merely imputed upon the aggregates. So the word aggregates gets in there, but it's just that I that is being referred to, that you're taking cognizance of, and your mind is conceiving it to be inherently existent. Making sense? Okay, good. I'm not sure. I probably remember Louise from another class. Louise, are you following? Are you listening?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm gonna have to join the Monday discussions, I think. I want to hear more. It's
Okay,
great.
good.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, good. Just checking. So, where are we? We should take the mere I or the mere person that is, as I said, the conventionally existent I, same thing as the mere I. The dependently designated I, the I that is merely imputed upon the aggregates, that's the same as the mere I. Or the mere person is the focal object giving rise to the thought, I am. We should take that to be the object of the identity view. Okay. So this is in one way, it's a mouthful. In another way, you say, oh, it's simple. And in even another way, it's quite profound. So it's referring to verses in the Madhyamaka itself, the root text. Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary here is a commentary to Madhyamaka, Chandrakirti's great composition, right? Which has both the root verses and commentary, his own commentary. So here, then it continues, as for its aspect. Okay, now we get into a little more complicated, or as Anne Klein says on page, what is it, 180 here? 180. With respect to the subjective aspect, Chippa says, as for its aspect, the commentary says, so again, this is talking about Chandrakirti's commentary. The thought I am, Jimba translates, imputes a self that does not exist. So what does that mean? The thought I am. That's Jimpa's way of translating that.
That must be the view of the transitory collection, the thought I am.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get here. So Anne says, hold on. I want to get this straight here. So Anne says, with respect to the subjective object aspect of a consciousness misconceiving the inherent existence. So what does that mean, aspect? There are two kinds of aspects. We talked about it, I think, in low rig a couple of years ago. So when you have a consciousness, it has an object, right? So the consciousness itself, the consciousness aggregate or the subjective aspect, that means how the consciousness is dealing with its object. That's called in the Prajnaparamita Sutra literature that some of you studied with Venerable Sangye Khandro, the Abhisamaya Alamkara, they refer to it as the Miknam, the Zinnam and the Zungnam. Zin means apprehender. So the aspect of the apprehender, that means the subjective consciousness, that's what Anne is saying here, with respect to the subjective aspect. That means how the subject mind, it is subjective, it is the subject rather than the object, how it is conceiving of its object. The objective aspect, or the Zungnam, Zung means what is apprehended. Zin means apprehender, the aspect of the apprehender, and the other one is the Zungnam, the aspect of what is apprehended. So that means how it's sort of presenting itself to you. That's its aspect, the objective aspect of the object. Here we're talking about the subjective aspect of the consciousness. Making sense? Okay. Paul, you've heard all this before. Making sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, where were we here? As for its aspect, the commentary says, reading Jimpa, the thought I am imputes a self that does not exist, conceives such self to exist, and manifestly clings to it as real. So this is in Chandrakirti's own commentary. Okay, so first of all, remember when we say the phenomena imputes, that the consciousness imputes phenomena, right? So some imputations are correct. Some imputations are wrong, like imputing the horns of a rabbit or, the son of a barren woman and so forth. So here, and also the imputation of a self-existent I, inherently existent I. The consciousness that thinks I, ordinarily, this is not talking about the educated wisdom consciousness that has already realized emptiness, just like when you're accosted and you think, someone has violated me, someone has made me mad or something like that. The thought I imputes a self that does not exist. So this is an erroneous imputation. It's imputed in your consciousness. And that consciousness conceives that self that it is imputed to be to exist, to inherently exist, right? Imputes a self that does not exist and conceives that self to exist and strongly clings to it as real, or as Anne translates that, having imputed that a self, which is, bracket, actually, unbracket, non-existent, having imputed a self which is actually non-existent, having imputed that it exists, a consciousness conceiving I adheres to just that as true. So when Jimpa translates here, manifestly clings to it as real. This is the word, I think, Shempa. Is this right? Wompa Shempa. Wompa Shempa. Shempa usually means a very strong conceptualizing consciousness, grasping. Wompa Shempa, he translates as manifestly clings, and translates it, adheres to just that as true. Remember when we talked about how the conscious, when we talk about I grasping, we say it's believing something, it's adhering to it, it's going along with it very strongly. Okay? So the text continues. Let me get a sip of agua. So the text continues, Lama Tsong Khapa's commentary. So as stated here, the identity view, the view of the transitory collection that grasps the I as truly existed. The identity view, the view of the transitory collection, grasps the I as truly existent. When it says real in Jimpa's translation and in Anne's translation as true, that's dempa. So it just means true or truly existent or real. So that's one of the synonyms. It's not using the word inherent existence here, but this to say that it grasps it as true, that it's real, that it really thinks that that exists. So as stated here, the identity view grasps the I as truly existent. Furthermore, the commentary states, again, going back to Chandrakirti's commentary, the identity view is an afflicted intelligence that operates by way of I and mine. So we just read that quotation from the commentary in a previous sentence. I read the long passage, and there were lines that said just exactly that. So the commentary, yeah. So Anne says, the commentary says, with respect to that, the view of the transitory collection is an afflicted intelligence. She puts in the Tibetan and Sanskrit, Sherab Nyonmong Chen. When we talk about Sherab or Prajna, there is the non-afflicted wisdom, which doesn't grasp phenomena as truly existent. And there's the afflicted or, prajna, which does grasp them that way. With respect to that, the view of the transitory collection is an afflicted intelligence. In Sanskrit, it has shlit. John, can you pronounce, how do you pronounce Klishta? Shklit?
Yeah, that's klishta. Klishta prajna.
Klishta. So that comes from the word klesha, which is the nyonmong. Klishta is kind of nyonmong chen, prajna, which is engaged in such thoughts of an inherently existent I and mind. So we're going to be talking about this in more detail. What's the difference between I and mine? But that's what's being said here, first of all. So this is we just read the quotation from, I think it was 6:120 earlier. Okay, so Lama Tsong Khapa continues in Jimpa's translation, therefore is described here for something to be the focal object, or the referent of the innate view of the transitory collection, the innate identity view, it must spontaneously give rise to the thought, I am. Or you don't have to say, I am. He always says, I am. Chikta lenke gi mikbala ngao nyamba. Ngao just means I, exclamation mark. Not so much I am, but anyway. And says, thus the object of observation, both of them use the word object, but the word object is not there. It's just the referent, the mikvah. There is something called the mikyul, the referent object, but that's not exactly the same as the referent. The object of observation, the mikvah of an innate view of the transitory collection, must be something that naturally generates an awareness thinking I. So she has it just I rather than I am. Therefore, the innate conception of persons who are of a different continuum from your own continuum, as established by way of their own character, the conception that believes that there's a self of other persons, right? Not in your own continuum. That is established by way of its own character, or in other words, that is inherently existent, is an innate conception of a self of persons, but it is not an innate view of the transitory collection. Jimpa translates, thus, although the innate grasping at persons with separate continua, notice the nice, what is continua? Is that Greek or Latin? When you try continuum, you make plural to continua. Who knows their grammar?
Latin.
Latin, yeah.
It's Latin, okay. Continuum, continua. Okay. Thus, although the innate grasping at persons with separate continua as existing through their own intrinsic characteristics does constitute grasping at the self-existence of persons, but it is not the innate identity view. It is not the view of the transitory collection. So this is just reiterating what we already know. The view of the transitory collection only views your own continuum and your own sense of I and mine, M-I-N-E, whereas the view of persons other than yourself, grasping them to be inherently existent, is a selflessness of persons, but it is not the view of the transitory collection. That's pretty simple, right? Jennifer, you're nodding slightly. Right. Okay, good. Okay. Mikhail? Okay. Okay.
I'll admit to I'm not sure I understand the point.
Okay.
Why would that be? Why would it not be the view of the transitory collection when it applies to the view of inherently existing I pertaining to another and not just oneself?
Yeah, because they have a transitory collection.
Okay. There's some help from Sean. So in their continua, let's say if you are thinking of Sean, say, why did Sean interrupt? John, so you're thinking Sean, in his continuum, he has a view of his own self. That's called the view of the transitory collection. That is the name that's given. So even the etymology of that word, view of the transitory collection, is a little bit kind of Tibetanized. Paul, do you know the Sanskrit of that Jigsaw-Klatawa? It can be interpreted in other ways. Usually in the Pali Canon and others, they translate it a different way. What is it?
It's like Satkaya Drishti or something.
Something like that. Hey.
Sadkaya Dristi, right? Sadkaya Dristi. So others, like in the Pali Canon, they say, no, that's not saying the view of the transitory collection, but in the Mahayana, not just the Tibetan, but the Tibetan commentators have come up with this translation of Sadkaya Dristi. Dristi means view, right? Tawa. Kaya usually means body, right? Like Dharmakaya or something like that. But kaya also means collection. Usually a kaya itself means a collection of parts. You know, the Dharmakaya has parts. And the sadkaya dristi, view of the transitory collection. So somehow the Tibetans take the sad as meaning impermanent or transitory, whereas some of in the Pali Canon, they take it to be truth. So anyway, there's some discussion about that. That will come up later when we talk about the etymology of Chiksokla Tawa, the view of the transitory collection. So to answer John's question, that only refers, the view of the transitory collection refers to a consciousness within your own continuum, viewing your own self only. And viewing that the I and mine that appears to you and you're grasping to it as inherently existent. Whereas when you refer to other people that are not in your own continuum, that are different continua, than yours, continuums than yours, that is not called the view of the transitory collection, because the view of the transitory collection only refers to viewing your own I and mine. So you don't refer to Sean as I. If I compliment Sean, saying, Sean, you have nice bushy beard, John doesn't think, I've been complimented.
Right.
Only referring to I and mine. So that's in your continuum. Nadine, what do you think?
Thank you, Venerable George. Maybe that's why Thupten Chimpa translated identity view, because we identify only with our own continuum, not other continua.
Yeah, it could be. It might be that he's cognizant of the Sanskrit of that. I don't know. I don't think it comes in the book, any note of, we'll see later, I can check, but that could be. So that's legit, it's completely legitimate for him to say identity view, but we're more familiar with the view of the transitory collection as a direct translation from the Tibetan Jik Sok La Tawa. Jik means transitory, Sok means collection, Tawa means view. Okay, so thus, although the innate grasping at persons with separate continua, grasping them as existing through their own intrinsic characteristics, or grasping them to be inherently existent, does constitute grasping at the self-existence of persons. It is not the innate identity view. John, you accept? Is that clear now?
Yes, especially with the word innate. I think that kind of maybe it needs to be a part of it as well. Something about
you can have innate view of Sean as being inherently existent too. That's not so operative here. The innate just means that the one that's sort of like the one that continues from life to life, that doesn't depend on any kind of tenets that you learned. Let's just read this next section. This is where we'll start next time. The phrase, gets a little bit complicated here. The phrase, quote, operating by way of I and mine, unquote, or engaging I and mine, this does not, so this is referring to some statement in the Majjhimaka Vatara when it says operating by way of I and mine. That phrase does not indicate that the mere I and the mere mine are the held objects of apprehension of this innate identity view. Whoa. What is indicated is that such an innate identity view possesses the aspect of apprehending these two, I and mine, as existing through their intrinsic characteristics. Okay, so this is where we're going to stop. This is where we're going to start next time. Oh, I can't change the color. Okay. So what is this talking about when it says, and let's just read what Anne says there. In the citation just above from Chandrakirti, so that's where this quotation, when Jimpa says the phrase, operating by way of I and mine, Anne makes clear what that phrase is. She says, in the citation just above from Chandrakirti, engaged in such thoughts of I and mine. Jimpa had said, operating by way of I and mine. So she's translating it, engaged in such thoughts of I and mine. That citation does not indicate that mere I and mere mine are the objects of the subjective aspect of the mode of apprehension. Whoa! Rather, it indicates that a view of the transitory collection has the aspect of conceiving those two to be established by way of their own character. I'll just give a short synopsis of what that means. It means, and there's some complication with the words, but anyway, what it means is the view of the transitory collection doesn't apprehend the mere I and mere mind. Mere mind that's not its object of apprehension or its what's the word, mode of apprehension. In Tibetan we say zintangi, usually say zintangi yul, the object of the mode of apprehension. Here it just says the mode of apprehension that's synonymous with what is being apprehended, what is being known. You're not knowing the mere I and mere I. That's not what the view of the transitory collection is focusing on. It is referring to those, sort of like you've already talked about those. You're already assuming the I and mine existing, and you're grasping them to them as being inherently existent. That's what that paragraph is talking about. That's where we'll start next time. How are we doing? Amy, I didn't hear from you today. Are you okay? Are you wearing your mask when you go to the Whole Foods?
Yes.
Good, okay.
But I sneeze anyway.
Yeah. I've heard some of the jurors.
Yeah.
Some of the jurors in the Trump trial, either they had COVID or they were exposed. So it's going around again, people. So be careful, all of you.
Oh, it's all over New York. It's everywhere.
Yeah. Okay. So anyone?
Not only COVID.
Yeah, these other viral things. Anyone have questions? We'll have discussion on Monday. John's thinking. Mary Ellen's thinking. KT is thinking without hand mudras. Okay. Doris, question? Okay, you're okay. Snehi. Rocio has a question.
Yeah, I have a question. So I understand apprehending of the I, the self, the I that we conceive as self-existent. But the mind, like the mind,
M-I-N-E?
Yeah. That is a little like, since that is to me like a thought, like this flower is mine.
Right.
It's not a thing. It's not like a mere conventionality like the I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah,
I'm having a hard, like the I is more solid. You can say, oh, this is the mere I, but the mere mine is just like a thought.
Yeah. That's my mudra also. I don't have any hair up there, but that's like so. Yeah, we'll go into detail about this. It's a little bit how to say counterintuitive, but when you understand it, it makes sense. So when we say I, we understand what that means because we recognize I in our own continuum. And we understand if you look for it in your own continuum, you can have a sense of the mind that's grasping to it, adhering to it as being truly existent, that's right. Yeah, that I do exist. There is another corollary of I called mine, M-I-N-E, which I pronounced earlier as mind, M-I-N-D. So mine. So what is mine? Just as you said, like my computer. Oh, you can even say my aggregates, my hand. My hand. So let's use that example. When you talk about, a wasp bit me in my hand. I'm putting up my left hand because that's where it did bite me. That's where it did bite me, right? So when we talk about mine, the view of the transitory collection grasping to mine, although the hand is an example of what is mine, there are many things that are mine. Excuse me, my iPad, my computer, my head, all these things are mine, right? Those are examples of mine. But here, when we say the view of the transitory collection grasping to mine, it's not grasping at the true existence or inherent existence of the hand, because that would be an example of what? Stephen, what would that be an example of?
Selflessness of phenomena, Venerable.
Right. That would be grasping to a self of phenomena if you were grasping to the hand as being inherently existent. So what is meant is the mind, the consciousness that is thinking something is mine. That is called, in this case, the factor in the view of the transitory collection grasping to mine. Okay, so it's a little bit counterintuitive because you'd like to think mine includes my body, my sofa, my hair, whatever, my car, my reputation, all of these things. Whereas mine is, again, a subjective mind that conceives things to be mine. So we'll talk about that in the very next class and successive classes. So good question. Any other questions before we go? Nadine, are you okay?
John.
Thank you. Yes, I have another question.
Yeah.
Does it implicitly mean that we can only know the conventionally existing self when we have realized the selflessness of the person?
So you're referring back to that, what I said,
Yes.
the class to think about why I said that was implicitly. So we'll talk about that Monday. I don't want
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Mikhail, you have a question? You said you came back on camera.
So far, so good, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Don, anything? Okay. David, you've been quiet today. I haven't heard your loquacious, is that the right word? Loquacious voice?
Wheels are turning.
Wheels are turning. Okay. Good.
Turning quietly.
Okay. Yeah, I don't hear them crunching. Okay, that's good. Okay. So
I thought John had a question.
Oh, John, do you have a question? Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. He's outing me.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure I'll have to follow up in discussion group for this one, but this apprehending aspect, or the aspects being referred to, or that's as Thupten Jinpa's translating it, these are aspects, I guess I'll phrase it like this, are these aspects of what he translates as afflicted intelligence of this Sherab Nyamongchen?
Well, there are aspects, yeah, there are
aspects of the mind.
There are aspects of the mind in general. So in general aspect, what I think, what is it, Paul? Akara, right? Namba.
Yes, akara. Yeah.
So what it means is there are two kinds of aspects with any kind of subjective apprehension. There's the subjective aspect, that means how the mind is dealing with its object. That's called an aspect. Yes, the word aspect almost sounds like something objective. Then there's the objective aspect, how the object presents itself to the consciousness. That's also called, there are other names for that also. As I said before, it's called Zinnam, aspect of an apprehender, and Zungnam means the aspect of the apprehended. They're related to that. So the word aspect is coming up mainly because it comes up in Chandrakirti's text. We don't even have to use the word aspect here, but the Lama Tsongkhapa is putting it in his translation, and we'll talk about that next time, because it's in Chandrakirti's text, and it sometimes makes the sentence a little bit more complicated. If you took out the word aspect, it would still be okay. That the I and the mere I and the mere mind are the objects apprehended, you can leave out all the words aspect, by the view of the transitory collection. It is, how to say, it is not the mere I and mind, it is apprehending them, the mere I and mind, to be inherently existent. Okay, we'll talk about that again. Minto, you get the last word. The last call for alcohol has been made.
Oh, thank you so much. You're so kind. I guess I'm not sure if this has been covered before, but
again.
I'm not sure if this has been covered before, but I'm curious, like, do they say at what level of mental concentration is required for you to realize or to identify the view of a transitory collection? Because normally in our day-to-day, I cannot even see my thoughts, I cannot even see my mind looking at my thoughts.
See your pulse? What did you say? You can't see everyday life? You can't see your what?
Tasks.
Thoughts. Like on a regular day-to-day basis, I sometimes find it hard to see my own talk. Your mind looking at your thoughts, right? So sometimes it's hard. Thoughts. Yeah. So I'm just curious, like, at what mental concentration is required to see to identify the view of the collection? Is it like the first jhana, second jhana, fourth jhana?
Okay. So thank you for that. So what it requires is calming the mind, first of all. So that's why in our usual classes, we begin by breathing meditation to subdue the thoughts in the mind. So a little bit more quiet, like cleaning all the junk off the top of your desk so that you can do your income taxes, right? Income tax report or whatever it's called. So there's room, there's not all this jumble in your mind. Then it takes some practice. It takes this is what the yogis practice, yogis and yoginis practice. They look at their mind, they look at their consciousness, and they instigate, within that quiet mind, they instigate the I to appear. The jikta, the jiksokla tawa. that's grasping the I. You think sometime that you've been embarrassed or that you've been falsely accused. Minto, were you ever falsely accused of anything?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, okay, good example. Okay, you can remember that. So think of that and you think, dwell on it. Let your mind inappropriately, pay attention to that and watch what happens in your mind. You say, they said I didn't do my job, or they said I scratched their car, or whatever you were, where you were accused of unjustly. Then watch that, let go of your analysis that instigated the I, and just watch how it appears to the mind. Watch how it appears and how your mind is dealing with that appearance. Is it believing it? Is it adhering to it? Is it grasping to it? Or is it think, no, that doesn't exist? If you were, you won't have the thought, no, it doesn't exist until you've had some realization of emptiness, probably. So you will see that the mind is grasping to that. And it's at that point you can begin to identify this view of the transitory collection. Probably the innate, because you're not dealing with any kind of tenets here. Okay, good question. So I hope to see some of you on Monday, and many of you next Saturday. As I mentioned before, William is nearing death. His oxygen level, O2, was what, 58%, I think I said earlier. A couple of hours ago, it may have gone down. His heart was 119, so he's non-responsive. So by next class, we may be without his presence in the world. So do some prayers for him. Was it Karen? Would you like to put up the dedication prayers?
Venerable George?
Yes.
I was just going to say, if you do speak to his caregiver again, you might mention to her that even though he's non-responsive, it doesn't necessarily mean that he can't hear her.
Right. Thanks for that. Yes, indeed. Usually when the eyes have become, I think she said the pupils, I can't remember the term, maybe Doris recalls, that were non-responsive, which usually means that the earth element has begun to absorb from the Buddhist point of view. So next is the water element, which involves the ears and hearing. So although the eyes may not be seeing anything, as Paul has mentioned, he may still have the ability to hear something. So let's dedicate the merits that we've created with our listening, our contemplating, and
merit.
Meditating. We're going to dedicate our virtues. Due to these virtues, may I quickly attain the state of being a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta, here it says jewel, but it's when we say Rinpoche, it means also precious. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not yet arisen in my continuum, may that bodhicitta that I've never had before arise and grow, and may that which has already arisen, even to a little degree, may it not diminish, but continue to increase more and more. And then for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, together with your lineages, all objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow here and now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings, through explanation and practice. So those are the ways that we can spread the Buddhist teachings, by explaining them and through our own practice. You, Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively both for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. You passed away. At this I was bereft. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the Triple Gem and the great waves of the bodhicitta of the conqueror's children, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And for all of our teachers, you who are my eyes for viewing the infinite number of scriptures, you are the supreme gateway for us fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging as you do with skillful means, moved by mercy. All illuminating spiritual friends, please live a long and stable life. And then just finish with a sealing of the dedication, this conventional dedication, in the emptiness of the three spheres. So sealing it with an understanding that the merits and the accumulation of wisdom that were created are not inherently existent. The goals dedicated to our quick achievement of Buddhahood, the development of bodhicitta, and so forth, they are not inherently existent. They do exist conventionally as mere imputations. They function. And the act of dedication, connecting these virtues, merits with their goals, that can't be found anywhere. That's a process like walking. There's just a name imputed to that process. Centering on that, those three spheres, recognizing them as empty, is ultimate dedication. So thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you next week. Good questions, inquiring minds. Yeah, read a little bit ahead, like Stephen, what did he say? He used some other word, reading. He said skimmed ahead. And we'll continue next week. Take care. See you soon.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank
See
you.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Venerable
you.
George.
See you.